What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's project is this Honda lawnmower, and the problem is I just picked this mower up and I'm not sure if it even runs. Let's take a good look at it, find out what's wrong with it, and hopefully we can fix it. In this video, we try and repair this mower. However, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. Now, Honda engines are my mower of choice, and that's because of the dual blade setup and of course the fantastic engine. However, without proper care, even a Honda engine will begin to wear out, and the self-propel system may also begin to have problems. Now, since we don't know anything about this engine, we'll start with the basics, and the first thing we notice is that the pull rope is all the way out and will not retract. That means we'll need to remove the recoil assembly and check it for any problems. Now, sometimes these nuts will get stuck to the studs, so I suggest spraying them down with some lubricant to make sure that the nuts turn and not the studs. The first thing I like to do is to lubricate the spring to make sure it doesn't bind up when the rope is pulled. Now, if yours is really bad, you might have to remove the spring, clean it, and then lubricate it. The main problem seems to be a worn eyelet though. I've not seen this type of wear on this engine before, but the best part is that the eyelets can be removed and turned around so that it wears on the opposite side. I'm not sure if you can just replace the eyelet, but since this took so long to wear through it, I'm sure this will work for quite some time. Now the rope shouldn't get caught in the worn part of the eyelet anymore. Now that the rope is retracting like it's supposed to, I can do a test pull on the engine to feel how much compression there is. And I hate to say it, but the engine isn't fighting back that much, so it's a bit worn. Now before I do a test start, I'll check to see if there's any gas in the tank, and there isn't any, which means this thing hasn't been started in a while. Also, it's a good idea to check the oil level and see what kind of maintenance this engine has had, and I hate to say it, but this oil is low and very dark in color, so it indicates that this engine is probably going to be a bit tired. Then again, this engine is over 15 years old. Now the air filter looks good, but if we take a closer look, it's also packed with dirt and debris. However, it will work for now after we knock most of the dirt out of it, and that's if we get the engine working again. I'll put some gas in the carburetor's throat and try starting it now. Well, that was an interesting sound. I'm pretty sure something's hitting the flywheel, but I'm not going to worry about it till I know the engine works at least. It did run for a bit, but the way it ran wasn't very promising. It should have roared to life, but instead it sort of sputtered to life and then slowly died. So next I want to see if it'll run on its own, and if it does, it'll save us a lot of time not having to go through the carburetor. Also, it looks like the throttle lever isn't moving far enough into the choke position, so we'll have to take a look at that as well. Now, it could be a problem at the choke flap on the carburetor or the lever itself. For now, I'll just manually prime the carburetor with some gas. Unfortunately, it didn't stay running, so now we have to go through the carburetor and see if there's a problem. If yours didn't start, then I'd suggest using a spark checker to ensure that your ignition system is working. Now, if you do have spark but it still didn't start, then I'd suggest using a compression tester to make sure your engine isn't completely worn out. To use the tester, simply remove the spark plug, thread it into the engine, and pull the rope several times or until the needle stops. I hate to say it, but this engine seems to have some compression, otherwise it wouldn't start and run, but I have a horrible feeling that the oil changes have been neglected and have taken a severe toll on the piston rings. On a normal engine, I'd like to see a number over 140 psi, but I do believe this engine has a compression release, so the number will be much lower, so I want to see a reading over 100 psi. If we look at the spark plug, we can see it's covered in oil, which tells us that the piston rings are worn and allowing too much oil to pass to the combustion chamber. It should be light brown in color and not wet and charcoal black. I really don't have a good feeling about this engine. So the reading is roughly 81 psi, which is not very good for this engine. What that means is that this engine is very worn, and if we do get it working again, it'll be extremely low on power, so we'll have a difficult time cutting tall grass. On top of that, if we use the self-propel, it's going to have a tough time just cutting grass at normal height. Even though the compression is still low, I want to look at the carburetor and see if we can get it running again. However, I don't want to put too much time into this repair because this engine will more than likely need a new set of rings more than a carburetor cleaning to make it useful again. After taking the bowl off, we can see there's some rust at the bottom of it, but it's really not that bad. I'll try to dislodge anything that might come loose and then just wipe it dry. After that, I'll remove the main jet and see if it's clogged. So the jet isn't completely clogged, but there is some buildup. I'll run a wire through it and get rid of it. After that, we'll remove the bolt on top of the carburetor and make sure that the jet under it is clear as well. Overall, I'd say this carburetor is in pretty good shape. It definitely was in working condition. However, I can't say the same thing for the engine. So here's the bolt we need to remove to get to the jet, but we need to remove the idle set screw first. The only thing we need to do is count how many turns it takes to bottom out the spring, then we can remove it. That way we can put the screw and spring back on the way it came off. So here's the jet, and unfortunately the wire we used before is too large to fit in the hole, so we'll need to use a smaller wire. While we're here, I want to check to make sure that the passage is clear from the front of the carburetor to the jet, and as you can see, it definitely is. This is a tiny drill bit that I use for small jets like this. You can find these online for a few dollars. Just carefully insert it into the jet and make sure it's clear. I would start off small first and then work your way up. As you can see, it's passing through the jet, so it was definitely clear already. Like I said, I was pretty certain that this carburetor was in working condition, so I'll reassemble it. Another reason why this engine might not be starting is that the valve lash might be out of tolerance. If the tolerance is too tight or too loose, then it might affect the way the engine is running or keep it from starting at all. To check the valve lash, you'll need to remove the valve cover and put the engine to top dead center. Then you need to use a feeler gauge to measure the clearance from the top of the valve stem to the rocker arm adjuster. This part of the installation is not my favorite. After getting everything reconnected to the carburetor, there's an emissions hose that can be difficult to reconnect to the back of the airbox. Also, realigning the airbox, carburetor, gaskets, and isolators for the bolts to go through is kind of a hassle. It's not impossible, but it's certainly not easy. Now, for testing purposes, I'm going to replace the bolts on the carburetor without the airbox so I can check the throttle cable's operation. So I removed the bolt holding the throttle lever to the handlebar. I want to split the case and take a look inside and see if there's a reason why the lever won't move all the way to the choke position. The lever should go all the way to this point here, and after looking at it, I think it just needs to be lubricated with some lithium grease along with some WD-40 for the cable. The cable moves okay, but it could definitely be better. After reconnecting the throttle lever to the handlebar, make sure you check that the choke is opening and closing like it's supposed to. This one is working just fine, so I'll replace the airbox so we can do a test run. I find that using bent pliers is the easiest way to install the emissions hose on the back side of the airbox. You don't need to use bent pliers, but it definitely helps. Also, after you tighten the bolts down for the airbox, make sure that the choke flap still works because the airbox could interfere with it. Before we install the original air filter, I want to show you just how much dirt was hiding in its pleats. Now, this much dirt in the filter would have caused the engine to run rich with fuel, as not enough air would pass through the filter and into the engine. If we get the engine working again, we'll have to consider replacing this air filter with a new one. If you buy more than one of these online, you can get them as little as $2, but if you order just a single, it's definitely going to be a lot higher. Now, I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but after moving the throttle lever to slow the engine down, I then moved it back to increase the engine speed, and then it puffed out some black smoke, and then slowly died. Now it doesn't seem to want to start again. I hate to say it, but I think I'm going to stop for today because I think the next repair on this engine might be serious. I plan on checking the valve lash and doing another compression test and possibly even opening the engine up to inspect the cylinder and rings to see if they're repairable. The worst part is that while it was running, I couldn't get the self-propel to work either. So unfortunately, this engine is worn out and the self-propel isn't working, so this project might not be worth continuing. So my question is, what should I do with this mower? Should I continue with the diagnostic and possibly rebuild it? Now keep in mind that this mower is 15 years old, so the repair cost versus value is definitely going to be an issue. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions, and I hope to see you in the next video.